605 BC, 3290 AM. King Nabopolassar of Babylonia, who founded the Chaldean dynasty, died after a reign of 21 years in the start of his 22nd. The crown prince Nebuchadnezzar II, already king of Assyria, was now made king of Babylon. He had a feeble constitution and had the appearance of a dwarf, having inherited his father's condition, and this would become the basis for a famous biblical story in the book of Daniel. He was raised in a temple precinct dedicated to the goddess Ishtar, Ashtoreth, and this upbringing instilled in him a religious fervour that is evident from building inscriptions and texts from this period attributed to him. Like his ancient predecessor Nebuchadnezzar I over 5 centuries earlier, he too was a builder king and religious reformer. This was the second year of King Nebuchadnezzar II, who counted his reign as having begun in 607 BC, when he defeated the Egyptians a second time. In this year the king of Babylon has a dream of an image, a statue, with a head of gold, breasts and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, and legs of iron, with feet having toes mixed with iron and miry clay. The statue was struck by a stone from heaven, uncut by human hands, and the metals were all destroyed. The king of Babylon was disturbed and threatened with death all the sages and wizards of the realm, if they could not tell him exactly what he had dreamed and the interpretation of it. Daniel interpreted this message from God, which concerned 4 empires: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. The stone would arrive in the last days to overthrow all human governments to establish the stone kingdom of the Messiah. In this year occurred a mass migration of Israelites from between the Black and Caspian Seas. With the collapse of the Assyrian Empire and emergence of Arya, the Israelites began fulfilling the words of the prophets, beginning their migrations to the north and west. This is the text of 2 Esdras, dated to about 420 BC. And whereas thou sawest that he gathered another peaceable multitude unto him, those are the 10 tribes, which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hosea, the king whom Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, led away captive. And he carried them over the waters, Tigris, Euphrates, and so came they into another land. But they took counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen, and go into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow passages of the river. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half. 360 plus 180 is 540 days, half of 1080. And the same region is called Arsareth. Then dwelt they there till the latter time. The prefix Ar is a geographic designation for mountain, river, or any important geophysical marker. Between the rivers Danube and Don in Europe, both named after Dan and the Danaan, is the river Sereth, as named on old maps. This is Ar-Sareth. Josephus in his Antiquities wrote that only 2 tribes migrated back to Palestine, and that the vast majority of Israel vanished into migrations. The Black Sea was long ago called the Cimmerian Sea, and these mysterious people erupted on the scene of antiquity, having no origin, no history, and were completely ignored by every ancient writer or annal prior to the 8th century BC. This is because prior to their appearance the lands between the Black and Caspian Seas were home to small bands of marauding nomads before the Assyrians dumped over 50% of the Israelite population into the area. The Cimmerians were often written about by the Greeks and Romans, though they admitted their origin was unknown, though when they appeared they were already a vast multitude. Though Qumri, Omri, was the origin of the name Cimmery, the Latin word Cimmerian means darkness, derived itself from the older Semitic Kemarim, darkness. The Cimmerians were those that the prophecies referred to. Quote, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light, unquote. The prophecy refers to the Christianization of those Israelite peoples descended from the Cimmerians. 1. Ages in Chaos, Volume 2. 3. Daniel. 4. Post-captivity names of Israel. 5. Antiquities. 604 BC, 3291 AM. Daniel and the other eunuchs from Judah taken before King Nebuchadnezzar II astonished him with their learning. He appointed them favourable positions in the Babylonian government. 1 Daniel. 603 BC, 3292 AM. In the 8th year of King Zedekiah of Judah, he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar II, and the Babylonian king swiftly besieged Jerusalem, lasting into Zedekiah's 9th regnal year. The king of Egypt came to Zedekiah's aid and tried to raise the siege against Jerusalem, but they were chased off by the Babylonians, and the siege was renewed. Syria and Palestine fell to Babylon by formal agreement. This was exactly 324 years, 108 times 3, after the Egyptians sacked Jerusalem and took all the temple sacraments in 927 BC. The Babylonians take Jerusalem in this year. This is the first overturning of the throne of Judah, which was prophesied by Ezekiel to overturn 3 times. This was 7 years before the second overturning of the throne of Judah in 597 BC by Babylon. The third would be in 585 BC, with the final fall of Judah and the complete deportation of the nation into Babylon. After travelling for 540 days, a year and a half, the Cimmerians spread out and occupied the Balkans. As Cimmerians, this immense population is divided between about 6 different tribes, all of Israelite origin. Whole tribes crossed the Danube River into Europe. As this is 204 years, 2448 months, after the founding of Macedon, there may have been some connection, war, or assimilation between them, especially in light of the evidence already presented showing that the Macedonian origin was in Palestine. This year begins the 1080 years of Daniel's prophecy interpretation concerning Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the 4 empires. The prophecy fulfillment began with Babylon, head of gold, taking Jerusalem in this year, 400 years after the establishment of the throne of David in 1003 BC. The sum of 1080 was the numeric seal of Israel, as was the Great Pyramid, a monument built and finished in 1080 AM, 2815 BC. This conquering of Jerusalem began 66 years, 792 months, to the final fall of Babylon in 537 BC by Medo-Persia, breast of silver, who would rule over Judea for 207 years, 2484 months being 414 times 6, before they would be conquered by the Macedonians, thighs of brass. Macedon would reign until 146 BC, 184 years being 2208 months, or 552 times 4, when they would suffer defeat by Rome, legs of iron. In the year 63 BC, Rome would annex Syria and Judea, this being exactly 540 years after Jerusalem fell to Babylon, head of gold, and Israelites migrating as Cimmerians and Scythians, settling the Balkans in Europe, this people being the ancestors of the Germans. The year 63 BC is the epicenter between 2 540-year periods, spanning backward and forward in time. For 540 years after 63 BC is precisely the year 476 AD, when the 10 kingdoms of Europe, led by the German Odovacar, conquered Rome. The year 1080 from the Israelite settlement of the Balkans and crossing of the Danube. The 10 toes mixed with iron and miry clay are the 10 kingdoms of Europe of Israelite descent, clay, mixed with iron, partially assimilating with Roman people over a period of centuries, these being the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Geneticist Brian Sykes had researched tens of thousands of genetic samples from around the world and concludes that the largest genetic contributors to the British Isles and Ireland came from the Middle East, as one group that migrated to the Balkans where they became 2 groups. One group followed the Mediterranean and Atlantic coasts, and the other crossed through Europe. They left their genetic markers in Spain, France, all of continental Europe, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and eventually America. This is exactly what will be shown as more and more proof of these amazing migrations are cited in this research on the origins of the Germans, Cimmerians, Scythians, Gauls, and Celts. 1. 2 Kings. 2. Secrets of Time. 3. Ezekiel. 4. Saxons, Vikings, and Celts.